Okay, perfect. People will kind of be joining us. I hope everyone had a great first session. We had a really awesome session here. I'm super excited for you guys to get to see this. Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone so much for being here. I especially want to thank our speakers today, Angela and Marta, who have come here to speak with us. There we go. I'm just gonna step back and let them talk, but if you guys have any questions or concerns, you can just private message me in the chat, and I will turn it over to Angela to start.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me here. Very glad to be here. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. It's an honor and pleasure. Before we get started, I thought, let me just share screen really quick. I thought we could, acknowledge the land. In the Los Angeles Basin, that would be the Tongva, the Chumash, the Gabrielino tribes, and the community that me and Marta are part of in Northeast Los Angeles. It's a community called El Sereno. That's where the Tongva tribes resided. And before it was called El Sereno, it was called Ochunga. And Ochunga means the place of the roses. So we're very proud of our community's origins. We're not of Tongva descent, but it's really important for us as we're talking about land. We're talking about properties. We're talking about the fight for housing. That we recognize, that we're visitors on stolen land, and that the Tongva people are still alive today, and we just want to give our gratitude and thank them. So this is an old picture. I'm not sure if people could see it. Probably one of the oldest pictures of El Sereno. And there was a family called the Bats family that was of Basque descent and had owned all of El Sereno. So I'm going to stop share, and we're going to move on to a video. Me and my father, Roberto Flores, had created and co-founded the Eastside Cafe, an autonomous cultural space inspired by the Zapatista movement, and he's going to go ahead and speak on that.
Welcome to your advocacy teach-in. We know you have these once a year, and we want to welcome everybody and thank you for inviting us. We're here at the Eastside Cafe, and as you can see, this is the mural inside the Eastside Cafe, and I'll be talking about the Zapatista movement in a little bit because we're very much inspired by that. And right now it's a mess because of COVID. And right here we're still giving away food every Thursday. So in a little while, we're gonna have other food coming in and we're gonna be distributing out the food. The advocacy teach-in is to expose you to different movements and different advocacy groups throughout the city, maybe throughout the state, even throughout the country. That you might be interested in getting involved in. We are involved with reclaiming our homes and reclaim and rebuild our community, two separate groups, but very tight together and functioning at times as one. We know that this particular advocacy session is about the housing crisis, the lack of affordable houses. At the same time, a runaway market where rents for, let's say, a one-bedroom apartment is something like between $1,700, $1,900 a month, and completely inaccessible for low-wage populations. We understand that there's at least 3 vacant houses for each homeless person. So there is the contradiction that when people say there is not enough houses, affordable houses, it's sometimes an economic reality that there are houses, but there aren't affordable houses. And so the driving force is the economy. The fight for $15 an hour wage isn't even enough, and it's still being combated. You know, we need a living wage, which is somewhere in between $25 and $35 an hour, is what really people should be earning to be able to afford housing. We were tired of no solutions by the government, city governments, county governments, state governments, federal. Their crisis is getting sharper and sharper, and then COVID hit. Before I start, let me just say that I'm the first of 3 speakers on this, and I'm just actually the introduction. I hope I don't take too much time. With me is Angela Flores, who is going to tell you about the history of the Eastside Cafe and how it led up to the reclaiming. And then Marta Escudero will relate to you her experiences as a reclaimer. When I say reclaiming, I mean taking homes, occupying homes by force, breaking in and taking them illegally in the truest sense of direct action, and in the tradition of Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Cesar Chavez, and all the rest of the folks that have been leaders in movements to change our conditions and situations, that have been willing to go against bad laws by getting arrested and bringing attention and exposing the ugliness of those laws. I'm going to go back now to our influences as the Eastside Cafe. The Eastside Cafe was inspired by the Westside Cafe. Now, where was the Westside Cafe? To your surprise, perhaps, the Westside Cafe was at Loyola Marymount, where you are at right now. In 1992, I was working there as assistant director of Chicano Latino Student Services, Chicana Latina Student Services. And as such, students approached me and asked me, can we do something about the AB 540 students, which are the undocumented students? What we came up with was a way to raise funds and bring in people at the same time, a monthly event that we called the Westside Cafe. The Westside Cafe lasted for about 15 years. I'm not even sure if it's still going. It was still going about 10 years ago when I last checked. What it did is that it was a moving cafe. It was a traveling cafe. It went from campus to campus, and we would set up the cafeterias, convert the cafeterias magically into a cafe where, there was some coffee and some sodas and some water and no alcoholic drinks, of course, on campus. And there was culture. We brought in the Chicano culture and Black groups that were coming up. The Westside Cafe started, I'm going to correct myself, it started in about 1996. And we featured groups like Yesca, Quinto Sol, Dark Eyes, Quetzal, and many other musical groups. And then there were graphic artists like Jose Ramirez, Omar Ramirez, Peps, Joe Galarza, and theater groups like Chusma, and many other groups that were a lot of them from El Sereno, from Highland Park, from Lincoln Heights, from the East Side, and some from the West Side as well. It also included poets like Marilena Fernandez, who is a playwright, and lawyer and poet Evangeline Diaz Ordaz, and of course the poet Marisela Norte. We're all participants in this West Side Cafe that you should be very proud of, and look into the West Side Cafe tradition. And that was our inspiration for developing the East Side Cafe and calling it that because it was a venue, it was a cultural venue that featured young people. And sure enough, once we established the East Side Cafe in 2003, there were many poets involved here and many rap groups and many spoken word groups and individuals that came through this venue right here. And so we continued with that tradition. The other inspiration of the West Side Cafe and the East Side Cafe was the Zapatista movement. And as you could see there on the wall, the Zapatista women coming out of the historic Caracol from their history and calling for autonomy. And autonomy was an interesting concept and a word that resonated inside of us. We really felt that need for autonomy at the local level. And what that means is basically self-determination at the local level, that we, the people of different communities, be involved in planning and deciding what will happen to our community 10 years from now, 5 years from now. We need to be part of that decision. It's for our children and for the generations that come after us. And so this notion of self-determination and autonomy was a central and immensely important notion then, and it is today. And in 1996, by chance, my wife convinced me to apply for a Fulbright because she felt I needed to go to Chiapas and be there for a year, which the Fulbright allowed. I had been going back and forth to Chiapas since 1994, since the uprising. These folks right here took up arms, didn't want to, but did, because they had no choice. They were in a desperate situation. They took over 6 municipalities and in the state of Chiapas, which is the most southern state of Mexico. Immediately looking at the images of indigenous people taking over these municipalities and putting out their messages, we couldn't help but get deeply inspired by their actions. Many of them were going, you could see images on television, going through the jungle with wooden rifles, more as symbolically taking destiny into their own hands and really showing the world that they really weren't about violent overthrow, that they really were about the peaceful transition into and transformation into something much more just, a structural change in the way people relate. So my wife convinced me to apply for that Fulbright, which is a very prestigious grant. I really hesitated and didn't want to. I don't like to get rejected, like as everybody else, but I tried. To my surprise, I was awarded a Fulbright. The Fulbright consisted of being a year in Chiapas, and I planned to go and study the democratic process of the Zapatistas and their view of society and the role and relationship to government. And so that's what I did. But I took a lot of LMU students with me, in a sense, because they came and visited, and they also began to travel to Chiapas. And in 1997 or 96, while I was there, here in Highland Park, the big Frente Zapatista was forming. And it consisted of youth, a lot of youth, that related to the Zapatistas and wanted to apply some of the thinking, some of the general thinking concerning local autonomy for our communities, local self-determination. They convinced the Zapatistas. We went out there and spoke to their leadership, and we convinced them to hold an encuentro. So in 1996, there was an encuentro. And off of this encuentro, a lot of the people, we were able to take 120 artists and that were graphic artists, music artists, theater artists, and they, in a sense, are leaders and natural leaders in their community, organic leadership in their community, wanting to project out the pain of the community at the same time, the beauty of the community, and at the same time the future, the hope in the community. And so these artists came back from that encuentro. So we had an encuentro in August of '97 with the Zapatista communities. And then again, I went back to Loyola Marymount, and a lot of the Loyola Marymount students related to the encuentro and related afterwards to both supporting the Zapatista movement in Mexico, as well as looking at this whole question of autonomy to apply here ourselves. And so there, I wanted to introduce these points to you because you are there in it, and it's almost like introspection. I wanted to put a mirror in your face and show you who you are, because you are already part of the legacy of the reclamation movement here. Because the reclamation movement, it's all about taking responsibility for self-determining community. We are applying the principles of self-determination when we reclaim, when we take back what's ours and take responsibility for this piece of Mother Earth here in this community, and where we network with other people doing the same. When we do this, and if we all do this, we can affect or effect tremendous change and structural change, transformative change that we need to alleviate some of the harms in our society. I'm going to stop here, and Angela is going to follow me to relate to you the Eastside Cafe experience and then the lead up to the reclaiming. Thank you so much.
All right, so that was my father, Roberto Flores. He's a co-founder of the Eastside Cafe, co-founder of Reclaim Our Homes, United Caltrans Tenants. And I wanted to correct an error that he made. So LMU, he's talking about the LMU in Santa Monica. So the Westside Cafe is there. It has its origins there, but no worries. Everyone is part of the legacy anyways. If you're about housing justice, then it's all good. You're a part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen again. My presentation. So again, I just want to reiterate, I'm Angela Flores. I'm one of the co-founders, co-facilitators of the Eastside Cafe, an autonomous space inspired by the Zapatista movement. I'm also a Caltrans tenant. So me and my family have been tenants for the last 29 years under the California Transportation System, an institution that's known to construct roads and freeways. And I'm also part of the United Caltrans movement. I'm co-founder and communications manager with the El Sereno Community Land Trust. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about our story as a space, community cultural space, as our fight against Caltrans, our fight for autonomy, and how things led up to the Reclaiming Our Homes effort. So this is our little humble space, the Eastside Cafe. It is located in El Sereno, Ochunga, symbolically located on the route of the 710 freeway. And mentioned earlier that the Eastside Cafe is this cultural hub for almost 17 years. And so it's a safe space to have discourse on a lot of social issues affecting our communities, BIPOC, POC communities, and making sure that we have a safe space for it. And we're almost like an anomaly where there are little spaces like this and very little resources where we can provide. We understand that in the name, it says EcoSpace, Educational, Cultural, Health, Organizing Space. So it's a multi-use. And understand that our people need healing too, and self-preservation and being able to preserve our culture. So we offer classes on cultural arts. We have events. We have parties sometimes. We have mercados. We have healing circles, you name it. And along the, the political, when we talk about social injustices, we talk about anything from housing to LGBTQIA issues, to anti-blackness, to gentrification, to immigrant rights, all of that. So we've been doing this for quite a while, and when we started in 2001, maybe a few years when my father came back from Chiapas. A lot of people from our community, a lot of people from our political, cultural communities approached him and asked, for mentorship and what he saw, what he learned. And so he was like a sponge, like he had a lot of the information to gather, but also like to apply to our own situations here. We have to understand, we're not indigenous people in these parts of Chiapas. We're not going to have the same situation where it's very different, but we could apply these values. And so we started off and founded a space, obtained a space in 2000. My dad says 2003, but I feel like it's 2004. And, a lot of people co-founded it with us, professors and artists, but also the Caltrans tenants, a lot of our neighbors and tenants who had been fighting Caltrans for quite a while. So this is Caltrans, California Transportation System. And it's this, the headquarters is this really ugly, state-of-the-art, monstrous building in the middle of downtown LA. And the story is that Caltrans bought properties in the 1960s from eminent domain throughout 3 cities, El Sereno, South Pasadena, and Pasadena, to extend the 710 freeway to the Pasadena 210 freeway. And within 4 decades, they proved to be your typical corrupt, deceptive slumlord. I feel like I don't really need to explain to you all. I feel like everyone already knows this, but it's very typical that slumlord would do these things. Profited off of so many tenants, and soon developed a very abusive relationship where a lot of tenants feared for their lives, as we would see people getting harassed and evicted. And so families would fall victim to Caltrans' constant harassment, lack of maintenance, just negligence, and we were seeing a lot of tenants pass away. You had families who rented from the very beginning in the 1960s, and then throughout time they started passing away without any housing justice, and we didn't want to see any of that. So we've been fighting, and we fight every day for justice. So this is the No on 710 freeway actions from the 70s to the present. There's been a history of activism throughout the years, as we've all slowly become environmental activists with the threat of demolishing our homes and building a freeway to go through with it. We all know the repercussions of what a freeway meant. It meant tearing families apart. It meant pushing away families as there's the rise of housing costs. There is a picture of, on the right, that Caltrans had put out in one of their proposals. And after fighting them for so many years, they were defeated on building a freeway on surface, but proposed instead to build an underground freeway that would go underneath our homes. And very serious about this, and so much so that they had these blueprints and plans and presentations, and one of them included like some exhaust towers. If you're going to have a tunnel, where would all the fumes go? And so this was environmental racism to us because this was going to be in El Sereno. And already we have a lot of freeways that go through all communities in the East Side. We're probably the only community in East LA that doesn't have a freeway, and it's because of the fight, of us fighting throughout so many years. So on the left, it's there's a poster I found, but there's so many actions and so many solidarity with El Sereno tenants and South Pass and Pasadena tenants, and that even though South Pass and Pasadena were more affluent neighborhoods, we were able to unite on this one issue. And so, we had these conversations, a lot of, the conversation of climate change and global warming came up, and, it was just ridiculous. But also, like, we all, it felt like it became like this intergenerational movement, and how this fight is now passing down to the descendants of these renters and the next generation, trying to fight for their homes. So on the left, you have a picture. It's probably like late 80s, early 90s to fight the freeway in South Pasadena. Unfortunately, I couldn't find too many archive footage. And on the right are a couple of pictures from an event that we hosted back in 2012, talking about how a tunnel was just preposterous and ridiculous, and that no one was aware of it, and or maybe like the larger community wasn't really aware of it. So it was definitely a place where we provided music, spoken word. We're big on arts and culture, but we also had workshops, educational workshops, and it was a way to again unify everybody. So fast forward to 2017, in the times of gentrification, was spreading, and we saw a rise in displacement. As a space that is inspired by indigenous folks rising up against their government and understanding autonomy, liberation, and decolonization, we were doing a lot of anti-gentrification work, and there was something that happened to us personally, where the owner sold the building, the whole building that you see, to a buyer, and we intervened and protested this buyer. So he came for an inspection one day, and we introduced ourselves, and we welcomed him in the space. We presented who we are, and then we asked him to back away, to back off of this deal and to let us purchase this building, because it would mean destroying everything that we built, and destroying this community. And so he didn't really take us serious, and that's when we did direct action. And so we're very, very big on direct action, and just having the means to confront and challenge these developers. And so we followed him. We had like a Bluetooth mic, and we were able to make chants and confront him. And he came back to us, and he said, okay, I'm going to give you 10 days. And if you say you have the money, go ahead and buy it. We, went ahead and did a GoFundMe and raised $200,000. We were able to go into escrow, and we partnered up with a nonprofit that would be a fiscal sponsor to help us purchase the building. So not even like a week, or just like maybe a couple of days after, the board of Metro voted unanimously to end all plans for the 710 freeway. So it was a big victory that we were able to reclaim this space and this property, but also that we were able to stop the freeway from being built. So in these conversations that were happening, there was something called the Roberti Law that came into play. And the Roberti Law says, it was enacted by Senator David Roberti in 1979, and it says, if the freeway doesn't go through, then all the renters in the homes have the right to purchase their home at the original price that Caltrans first bought it for. So you have these prices from the 60s versus like the housing market prices now. And so it seems like, you know, something very, very shocking to like all these bureaucrats. But I'm one out of 3 plaintiffs right now that's in court with Caltrans, because what Caltrans is doing is trying to violate that law. So even though the freeway is now dead and defunct and not going to go through, Caltrans is still a slumlord. It's still up to no good. And we had to quickly develop a group that people can recognize, and an official group called United Caltrans Tenants. And so some of the grievances were that Caltrans, what they were doing, they were just pretty much depopulating, what we call depopulating the corridor, where they were hiking up the rents 10% every 6 months. They were violating the Roberti law, like I said, and instead of offering the homes at the original price, they were inflating the prices and bringing it to market value. And then they, you know, on top of everything, I think, as recent as end of 2019, they refused people's rent. So this is like a tactic that slumlords do. Like sometimes they refuse your rent so that they have an excuse to charge you late fees, and it piles up. And then you're forced out of your home. You know, like you have all this debt. So, or illicit debt. So it pushes people out. So at the end of 2019, we were desperate. We were like, what is going on, and how come no one is helping us? We were trying to reach out to politicians, and you know, one of them was Jose Huizar. He was a corrupt politician, and he had no interest in helping us. He was our elected city council person, and actually, I'm not sure if anyone has heard of him, but he actually worked against our favor and doing backdoor deals with developers, and eventually got arrested for it, and now is in jail. So I'm just going to play this. On top of everything, what Caltrans had done was evict people and then leave them abandoned. And so this is the site we see every day. I counted 26 abandoned houses in this video, but you would be shocked at how there's over 200 abandoned homes up and along the corridor of El Sereno, South Pasadena, and Pasadena, while there's so many homeless and houseless people out in the street, or houseless, insecure families who are on the brink of being houseless. So, excuse me. We had to think of our next step. We had to think of a way to fight Caltrans and to get everyone's attention. And at that point, we heard about Moms for Housing, a group of Black mothers who decided to take on a house up in the Bay Area. And as a space, an autonomous space, and a cultural space, we feel we owe a great amount of debt to the Black community, and you know, not just Black organizers or prominent Black activists, but just the Black community for taking on that leadership, because they have to. And as brown folks, we follow their lead. And so a saying at the East Side is that there wouldn't be a Brown Berets if it weren't for the Black Panthers. And we usually, you know, take their lead. So a lot of it has to do with courage and the act of bravery we see from the Black community, like on a daily basis. So I thought I'd add that because it's what we've, you know, gone through in these times. Oops. And so we were inspired to do an action, a reclamation action, where it's not only taking on these homes and breaching and having it be a civil rights movement, but it's also about addressing the concerns we have as tenants and how we've been exploited and taken advantage of, and the right to liberation and autonomy. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Marta. She could talk about that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marta Escudero. I am a mother, a homeschooling mother of two daughters, 11-year-old Victoria and 9-year-old Mesty, and I'm part of Reclaiming Our Homes. And as Angela was saying, we were forced to do this reclaiming because the government really wasn't doing enough for unhoused folk. And our inspiration was Moms for Housing in Oakland. This is the first house we took on March 14th, which is it's a 1-year anniversary now. And like I said, it was inspired by Moms for Housing. I was at the time couch surfing. This was in November 2018. And I was couch surfing with my daughters in different places, sometimes on the floor, sometimes in couches or spare rooms or spare beds. But we were not stable. And we had a lot of depression and anxiety due to this as well. So I have worked as a social worker or case manager to moms. There were high risk, low income, women of color. A lot of them were on the streets and shelters waiting years to get housing or equitable rent. Section 8 here in Los Angeles would take years. I had a friend that applied when her daughter was 2 years old. She didn't get it until her daughter was a teenager. So I knew what I was up against, and I knew it was going to take a long time, and I wasn't going to wait. And I don't think anybody should wait. So I was looking for other ways to obtain this housing for my daughter so we wouldn't suffer. So when I saw these Black moms be so courageous and do this action, I actively sought out, how can I do this in Los Angeles? This is when my friend gave me Amy's number from Alliance of California for Community Empowerment, ACE, and they also work for Moms for Housing. And Angela made a call out in the community to see who was interested in doing something like this in Los Angeles. And she knew about these properties, which I didn't know of. So these are a lot of houses that the government's literally hoarding while there's people suffering in shelters and streets, especially our most vulnerable people, disabled people, elderly, families. For moms and for families, especially single moms, it's really difficult to obtain housing. There's a huge discrimination when you have children. Landlords want people to be quiet. And so with children, there's not any quiet really rarely, especially when you have children with special needs, which I do. And so it's you have that discrimination that they shut housing down for you. And also there's not enough shelters to house families. So I knew what I was up against, and I wasn't gonna wait, and I wasn't gonna take it. Around that time as well, Ruby Gordillo from ACE was canvassing this area and found the Eastside Cafe, and Maria Castro, that was also involved in the Eastside Cafe and was a part of Los Angeles Center for Community Law and Action, LACLA, brought another reclaimer, Benito Flores, to start speaking to Roberto Flores, Angela's father, and we began talking. We made that connection through the Eastside Cafe, since they have, like Angela said, a long history of just organizing this community and really being a part of this community's growth and activism. So we began talking in December, and then January, we started meeting in person at the Eastside Cafe. And we kept changing the dates. This isn't like something that was easy. Obviously, it's illegal. But for me, if there's unjust laws, then it is our duty to like break them and create justice for ourselves and take power into our own hands when the government's really not working for our safety. We have to take care of each other. And so we finally set the date on March 14th, which was right there when the COVID lockdown came, which I believe, worked in our favor. People didn't know what to do. This was like really chaotic times. And this helped establish like a no eviction, and people really weren't gonna, the government wasn't gonna have us evicted and have this be shown. We still got harassed by police, but there was a stance on no eviction. So that provided us safety. 2 weeks later, we took 12 other homes. This is a total of 13 homes that were taken. And we began negotiating with the city in July. HACLA, the Housing Authority of Los Angeles, was able to obtain some of these houses. I believe it's 22 of these houses from Caltrans, and the 13 families were able to be housed slowly. However, this contract was really dehumanizing and institutionalized. The contract they were setting for us had things like curfews. They needed to know who was going to visit us. And also they didn't allow alcoholic beverages, pets, a bunch of different provisions. And these are homes that we're living in. And we felt we had to push back against that and say, in a home, we have visitors. We could come and go whenever we want to. We're adults and we're of drinking age. We could have a beer here and there if we want to. Like, why are these restrictions in place? And we began to realize how these systems have dehumanized the unhoused populations and have these stereotypes of what unhoused people are. And we, in this organization, are breaking those stereotypes and letting them know our own individual stories, because everybody has different reasons why they're unhoused or unhousing insecurity. And what does that the unhoused mean? It's not just people living in shelters or living on the streets. There's also people living in cars, in trailers, around the parks. There's people that couch surf. There's people that are really crowded spaces. There's people that are housing insecure and one paycheck away from being on the streets. So there's a lot of elements and a lot of layers to what unhoused means. And unhoused people are not lazy. A lot of them work. They're working people. Just that the rent is really high and we cannot afford this rent. So that's another layer as well, that most people work and they're just not able to pay the rent. So that's what we were up against, and we were able to negotiate for a 2-year contract with PATH. So this is just the beginning. It's a small victory. We have a long haul to go towards, because we want permanent housing. We want autonomy and self-determination. And what we think is that in our community, obviously autonomy and self-determination looks different in different communities. Just like the Zapatistas say that, and we want to create a world where other worlds fit. And so every community will have their idea of autonomy and self-determination. So we are not living outside of capitalism, and it's impossible to just live off of capitalism. We're so codependent that we can't just lay off of capitalism, because we wouldn't be able to sustain ourselves. We'll be self-destructive. It can't happen. So we're slowly creating systems of autonomy so that capitalism at one point will be obsolete. It will destroy itself because we won't need it. So these are some of the ways we're building sustainability and living outside of capitalism. One is a food sustainability project, which I am, as I said, a homeschooling mom. These are my daughters, Victoria and Mesli. And in homeschooling, we started creating the seed library. We think this is really important. The commodification of seeds and food autonomy is really important for us, especially the corn seeds. In Mexico, there's a saying that says, sin maíz no hay país. Without corn, we're not a country, or we're not a people, really. Our connection to corn is very deep. And so, there's no wild corn, so the humans are needed to be caretakers and keepers of these corn seeds to sustain that food for us. And so we want to create this system of food sustainability from seed to the production of produce, to the consumption, because there's also a lot of street vendors that that need funds, and we want to sustain our own community without needing outside forces or outside corporations. And this is, like I said, baby steps. It's going to take a long time, but we're starting, and that's really important. In homeschooling, also we developed like a caretaking of the land method and theory on how we need to sustain this land for us on a long term and all living beings, including plants. And also the idea of social justice. My daughters are very much involved with reclaiming our homes. Without them, I wouldn't be here. I talk to them about what's going on. And obviously, I was risking arrest. I was doing something illegal, so I had to prepare them for that as well. And having those systems, the Eastside Cafe provided resources and community help in case that was needed. Help with my daughters if I was going to be arrested. Another project we're working on is a homeless count. Because of COVID, Los Angeles County wasn't able to do a homeless count in the community. And another reason is because in El Sereno, they get lumped with downtown Skid Row, which is the highest population here in the county of homeless people. And we get like left out of a lot of the resources due to this. We wanted to create our own assessment as a community to then be able to push politicians, policy, and resources to our own unhoused folk, or if not, provide other ways in grassroots methods in order to create these resources for our unhoused folk. And with that, I was going to pass it to Angela so she could tell us more about El Sereno Community Land Trust, which is what we're looking towards for El Sereno Community Land Trust. Is also building in the creating those ways of autonomy and self-determination.
Right. So back when we intervened the sale of our building in 2017, we were successful in getting into escrow and then becoming landlords. And of course, that didn't sit well with us. We didn't feel comfortable being landlords on stolen lands, but yet we were faced with this challenge to prevent gentrification and displacement of housing insecure, houseless people. And did a lot of research, did a lot of studying, found that land trusts were actually something that are trending right now, and a lot of people are looking into so that they can acquire land and make housing affordable permanently. So its origins come from black farmers who needed to have their own land to grow their own food. And a lot of it comes from redlining and pushing people of color away from buying a home. So there are different land trusts across the country that can offer that. And so I think that, with that, we felt that land trusts were probably the closest thing to autonomy. It's never going to be autonomous because it has a 501c3 attached to it. But that's when we decided, as Eastside Cafe will always be autonomous, we just need to create something else to have that leverage and utilize the 501c3 or the nonprofit number to obtain land, to get funding, to get recognized or whatever, and to work with the community. It's also very community oriented. It has the values of a lot of what the Zapatistas are aligned with. And, when it comes to food sustainability, like Marta was saying, mutual aid, we would have the means to create co-ops and employ tenants. So who better than the tenants themselves to understand their problems within maintenance or their neighbors' problems and just help in those areas. We're partnered up with Habitat for Humanity. with a lot of different housing agencies in LA, and actually we're part of the LA Community Land Trust Coalition with 4 other land trusts in Los Angeles, and we're definitely like stronger and are working with our county board member, Hilda Solis, who has got $14 million to put in a pilot program. So in the case that we don't get these properties on the corridor, like maybe the house that Marta is staying in right now, we're still going to continue as a land trust and acquire other properties in El Sereno and develop those lands either as affordable housing units, or we have the opportunity to preserve open green spaces. And this is what also attracted us, was that we are able to preserve and reconnect with the land and wildlife. And this is a way of connecting with the Tongva people, as we mentioned before, and now have the opportunity to do so, because if we're talking about long-term reclaiming land, then the Tongva people need to be respectfully included in those conversations. And so we have a social media presence. Please follow us from Eastside Cafe LA to United Caltrans Tenants, Reclaim Our Homes, Reclaim and Rebuild Our Communities, El Sereno Community Land Trust. And I forgot to put, Marta has 2 daughters, Messi and Victoria, and they're really, really conscious, and they're really great. They have a radio show called The Sister Show, and it is like my favorite radio podcast or whatever. And it's just totally like I escape, and I hear all about their adventures, like eating sushi or listening to their cool playlists, and I just love it. So I'm just gonna throw that in there, Marta. Oh, you're on mute.
Oh, there we go. First of all, thank you so much again. Yeah, if you guys want to put anything in the chat, I can drop the links to the website there. We have some time. We have a little over 5 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions they want to ask, you can unmute yourself and ask. And if not, I would just ask Angela and Marta to share some ways that we can get involved if nobody has questions.
Seems like we have a question from Chris. And maybe, Chris, you could just say it if you want, if you have a question. Seems like you do. Oh, okay. So, Chris Jimenez, your efforts, from what I understand, your efforts for the Eastside Cafe is to humanize a dehumanizing system through direct action against Caltrans. I personally worked with the homeless population of San Francisco, already been affected by the construction of freeways, skyrocketing rents. From, yeah, what we understand, Caltrans is up in the Bay Area and has a lot of properties and does constructions up in the Bay, and they were recently audited. Like in 2013, it's just like a big mess. But they are like the worst slumlord in all of California, up and down. So yes, I delivered food to people living in single room occupancy, which is a result of Caltrans and other greedy organizations. And from many people I've met, it's just so upsetting how some people think homeless people are homeless because of their own volition rather than the circumstances they're in. How do we think we can change some of these stigmas regarding homeless people and in turn get more people to support sweeping legislation that seeks to humanize homeless people? Oh, that's a really good question. I think that I think there's a lot of consciousness on the rise. There's a lot of people speaking out again. Thanking the Black community and in fighting and being on the front lines. Right now there's the issue of Asian awareness and a lot of people of Asian descent are fighting, speaking up, where maybe before, like 20, even 20 years ago, people were afraid. We're afraid to speak up. And, we have terms like white privilege, fragility, white supremacy. We have like, how do we decolonize? Like, as a space, and as someone who's learned about decolonization like since high school, like I'm like thrilled to see that there's like a very political left presence on social media, mainly I guess within Instagram. I know that there's different audiences within those social media platforms. Um, how do we change the stigmas? I think it's just doing that and using your platform to change the narrative and to speak up. We have to be brave. We have to have courage, and we have to, as someone a part of the Eastside Cafe, the revolution starts in the kitchen. And start somewhere with someone. To have a conversation over food, in the living room, in the backyard, in the front porch, wherever. The Eastside Cafe used to have a slogan where, or kind of still do, where it's not a place but a state of mind. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a community cultural space. You could just do it anywhere and just start spreading awareness and knowledge. And I think people will come around. And I'm hearing of a lot of like left progressive slates for like neighborhood councils. And yeah, I think that has to do with a lot of the actions that took place during the summer, and how us, like the reclaiming our home actions, and how the second group of reclaimers were brutally taken out in these abandoned homes. And I'm not sure if anyone had seen those videos, but we were there, and where there was so much police presence, and a lot of people who are not educated, just a lack of education too, and who felt like they needed to protect homes and buildings over, lives. And so, yeah, like, where's the humanity in that? And I hope I answered your question, but for me, it's what we're dealing with right now. It's for y'all to get involved, or if you can, or just from afar. Is there's a senator, her name is Maria Elena Durazo, who created a bill called SB 51, and she created this without consulting any of us and continues to ignore us. But it's pretty much a bill where she would tend to the tenants and get all of her outside developer friends and outside agencies to come in and take over the corridor. But we see through the fine print, we've read the fine print, it doesn't help the tenants protect their homes. It doesn't allow them to organize a co-op, which directly affects the land trust. It completely takes away rights and doesn't give tenants or the residents an option to work with. So we're currently having to fight this policy right now. If y'all are on Twitter, call her out on her bullshit. This is something that discriminates just El Sereno as well. And time and time again, I think we're just tired when we're talking about autonomy. That equates to community control, and we've been hearing a lot about that, about defunding the police, and which we completely agree with, and putting more funds in resources, and making sure that the community has the right to determine their own futures and their destiny themselves, and instead of making us feel like, oh, I'm doing you a favor and it's for your own good. No, like you have to keep us in mind, and we have to take on those decisions. So so that's what community control looks to us and autonomy looks to us right now.
Thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story with us. I will also